Vistara Airlines Flight 944 was heading from Mumbai to Delhi with 155 passengers and 7 crew members on board. Everything seemed normal, but as they got closer to Delhi, the weather took a turn for the worse. Heavy rain, hurricane-like strong winds, and thick clouds made it impossible to see the runway. Tension in the cockpit was rising. Fuel was running low, and every passing second was bringing the plane closer to danger. The lives of 162 people now depended on what decision the pilots would make in the next few minutes. Will it land safely, or will this flight turn into another tragic accident? Let's find out. This is the heart-stopping story of Vistara Flight 944. It was the afternoon of July 15, 2019, at Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport, which was as busy as ever, with thousands of people coming and going every day. Amid this crowd, Vistara Flight 944 was getting ready for takeoff, heading from Mumbai to Delhi. This flight was special because it connected thousands of people daily between Mumbai and Delhi. The total flight time was about 2 hours, covering a distance of 1,150 kilometers. The plane was set to depart in the evening. The bus was supposed to reach Delhi by 5:00 p.m. For this trip, an A320 plane was being used, which was only a year old. It was a new and modern aircraft designed to use less fuel, provide more comfort, and ensure a safe journey. Vistara Airlines started in 2015, launched by Tata Sons and Singapore Airlines together. In just a few years, it made a name for itself in the Indian aviation industry and became the third largest airline after Indigo and Air India. There were a total of 155 passengers on this flight, and 5 flight attendants were there to ensure their safety and service. There were attendants and 2 pilots present. Passengers had already started boarding, and at the same time, the plane was being fueled with a total of 8,500 kilograms of fuel. This plane had enough fuel not just to complete the journey from Mumbai to Delhi, but even if there was an emergency and they had to change course, it could still fly safely. In the cockpit, the pilots were making the final preparations for the flight. The captain of this flight was 30 years old and had 8,500 flight hours of experience. The special thing was that most of those hours were spent flying this exact type of aircraft. So, flying today wasn't anything new for them. Sitting next to him was the 28-year-old first officer who had a total of 1,600 flight hours under his belt, with 400 of those specifically on this aircraft. Both were young, but their training and experience had them fully prepared for this flight. The plane was almost ready for takeoff, but the weather was a different story. It was July, the peak of monsoon season in northern India. Thick clouds and heavy rain were everywhere. Flying in such conditions is always a challenge. But it's in moments like these that experienced pilots truly show their mettle. They were showing their skills, but today wasn't like any other day. Today was going to be the biggest test of the pilots' decisions, their judgment, and their ability. Before the flight, the pilot was given important information, which included a special document called the Transit Briefing Sheet. This sheet had weather details and the names of airports where the plane could land if needed. On this list, Ahmedabad was the first alternate airport and Lucknow was the second. But when the pilot checked another flight-related document called the Operational Flight Plan, OFP, they noticed a mistake in it regarding Lucknow. Kohli was mentioned as the first alternate airport and Jaipur as the second, even though both documents should have had the same information. This was important so that if the weather got bad or for any other reason the plane couldn't go to Delhi, the pilot would already know where to land. This mistake could have caused problems later for Flight 944. Around 30,904 zone, the plane got permission for pushback. There was some light fog at the time, but the weather was good for flying. The pilot started the engines and slowly began taxiing towards the runway. At 3:10 p.m., Flight 944 took off from Mumbai. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, the passengers and crew settled in comfortably. Everything seemed normal, like just another routine flight. But no one had any idea that things were about to change in a matter of minutes. At takeoff, the plane had 8 tons, 274 kilos of fuel, enough to reach Delhi. On top of that, there was an extra 1,100 kilos of fuel in case they needed to divert to another airport. The plane gradually climbed to 35,000 feet. The pilot was in touch with air traffic control and was following the planned route. Meanwhile, back in Delhi, The weather department had already warned about bad weather as the monsoon storms were starting to form, but the pilot forgot one important thing: checking the weather at airports along the route. If the pilot had been suspicious about Delhi's weather earlier and had checked the conditions in Ahmedabad, Udaipur, or Jaipur, they would have had better options for a safe landing. When the flight got close to Delhi, the crew got bad news. There was a strong storm and high winds coming in. The rain was heavy and the sky was covered with clouds. In such conditions, the plane landing was going to be really tough. Just as the plane was getting ready to land, air traffic control came in with more bad news. The weather had gotten even worse. Landing was impossible. Several planes tried to land but had to take off again. Now, the flight was told to circle in the air. The crew stayed fully alert and kept checking the weather updates nonstop. The biggest question was, if landing in Delhi wasn't possible, what would be the next step? Trouble kept piling up. The sky had turned pitch black. The rain was pouring down hard, and the crew was getting jolted and kept receiving updates, but landing permission still hadn't come through. The plane had 1,100 kilos of extra fuel, so they could circle over Delhi for a while longer, hoping the weather would clear up. But doing that meant giving up the option to divert to Ahmedabad. Still, the captain decided to wait. With every passing minute, the fuel was running low, but that wait turned out to be their biggest mistake. Because they circled above Delhi airport for too long, the option to land in Ahmedabad was now completely gone. The options were basically down to two: either wait for permission to land in Delhi or head towards Lucknow. But since there were no clear instructions, making that call wasn't easy. That's when another option came up: Jaipur. Jaipur was nearby and the weather was good there. The problem was, Vistara Airlines didn't have any operational facilities in Jaipur. That meant no ground support, which could cause trouble for passengers. So, following the airline's policy, Lucknow was given priority, even though Jaipur was closer. The plane was safely circling over Delhi for 20 minutes straight, but by then, they only had 3,800 kilos of fuel left. The captain warned air traffic control that they could only stay in the air for 10 more minutes, after which they'd have to divert to another airport. The tension kept rising, and with every passing minute, the fuel was dangerously running low. Just when things were getting really serious, a relief came from air traffic control. At 4:57 p.m., the crew was told they could start the landing process in Delhi. Hearing this, the crew got a new hope. This was their last chance to land in Delhi. But the big question was, would the bad weather let them land safely? Or was the biggest danger yet to come? As the plane neared the runway, the weather suddenly worsened. Strong winds started blowing, making it hard to keep the plane steady. The captain lowered the landing gear and set the flaps, but the plane kept shaking. Passengers were jolted around, scaring everyone, and they gripped their seats tightly. Then, just as the plane reached about 250 feet, the wind direction changed. A strong wind started pushing the plane from behind, and on top of that, the runway was wet, making it risky to brake without slipping. In such conditions, stopping would have been really tough. The captain quickly decided that landing now wouldn't be safe. He pulled the plane back up into the air. The plane was airborne again, but fuel was running low. The pilots immediately decided to head towards Lucknow and started checking the weather there. However, before they could even reach Lucknow, another problem came up. Bad weather had set in there too. Meanwhile, back in the cockpit, there was a problem. Weather had turned bad on the way to Lucknow, and near Agra, there was an Indian Air Force base where civilian planes weren't allowed to fly. So the captain had to take a longer route, which was burning fuel much faster. Things were getting serious. Meanwhile, air traffic control suggested the crew divert to Jaipur because the weather was clear there and Jaipur was closer than Lucknow. But as soon as air traffic control recommended Vistara Flight 944 head to Jaipur, the crew refused. And they decided to go to Lucknow. Although Jaipur was safer, the pilots chose Lucknow because of the airline's rules. Vistara 944. Do you have any interest in diverting to Jaipur? The airport is vacant. Negative, sir. Lucknow is our designated alternate airport. Vistara 944, the decision has been made. The plane started heading towards Lucknow. Everything was normal at first, but as the plane began to descend for landing, things started getting chaotic like at Delhi airport. Meanwhile, bad weather and low visibility caused air traffic control. Vistara Flight 944 was put third in line to land, which made things more complicated. The pilots were running low on fuel, so they told ATC they couldn't wait much longer. Meanwhile, another plane that was trying to land had to go around because of poor visibility, which made the situation worse. Due to bad weather, the first plane's landing failed, forcing the pilots of Vistara Flight 944 to abort their landing and climb back up. This delay made the crisis worse as their fuel was running out fast. At 6:08 p.m., the pilots declared minimum fuel, making it clear they only had about 20 to 25 minutes of flight time left. Shortly after, the fuel indicator hit the amber zone, signaling danger. The situation was getting serious, and with no other options, the pilots immediately sent out a Mayday call. Mayday, 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 Vistara 944, declaring fuel emergency. We need an airport for immediate landing. But now the biggest question was, would Vistara Flight 944 be able to land safely amid the thick darkness and fierce storm? Something else was waiting to go wrong. Everything was starting to fall apart for this plane. First, the landing in Delhi failed. Then, because of bad weather, they had to change course. When they reached Lucknow, they couldn't land there either. So, the pilots decided to head to Kanpur, but the weather was bad there too. After that, they decided to turn towards Prayagraj. But then another big problem came up. The captain thought they might not have enough fuel to reach Prayagraj, making things worse. There was a problem with the plane system. So, they didn't have navigation info for Kanpur and Prayagraj, nor did they have the necessary charts for landing. In other words, they were trying to get there without any digital help, which was super risky. While the plane was heading toward Prayagraj, some relief came. Air traffic control said the weather in Lucknow had improved a bit, and visibility was now 600 meters, which was enough for landing. Shortly after, another update came saying visibility had gotten even better. Hearing this, everyone felt a fresh ray of hope. The first officer immediately contacted the control tower. A message was sent that the Vistara 944 VR was turning back to Lucknow. The captain immediately started preparing to land on runway 27. They only had one shot left. If the weather in Lucknow got bad again, things could get really dangerous. The plane had so little fuel that there was no chance for another landing attempt. Air traffic control gave the shortest, most direct route right away because the plane was basically running on fumes. Now, it was a matter of whether they could land safely on the first try, or something would go wrong at the last moment. A new danger was waiting for them as the plane came down to land. Things got worse. The strong gusts of wind made the whole plane shake, and heavy raindrops were pounding hard. In the cockpit, the pilots were struggling with all their might to control the plane. Passengers were gripping their seats tight because the landing was going to be really tough. Then, through the thick fog, the runway suddenly appeared. A few seconds later, at 6:04 in the morning, the plane finally touched down. The crew and passengers breathed a sigh of relief. But the real shock came after landing. When the pilots checked the fuel gauge, their eyes were wide open in shock. The plane had only 348 kilograms of fuel left, which was enough for just 5 to 10 minutes of flying. If they had decided to go to Prayagraj, the plane could have crashed mid-air due to running out of fuel. After this incident, experts questioned the pilots' decisions. Even though the pilots followed the company's rules, they made some serious mistakes. For example, they insisted on going to Lucknow while the weather kept getting worse, even though safer places like Jaipur were available. Plus, they didn't fully grasp how serious the low fuel situation was at the right time. Despite the dangerous situation, the pilots' licenses weren't revoked, but their decisions raised serious questions about fuel safety and their ability to make the right call under pressure. This incident taught us that pilots need proper training to make quick, correct decisions in tough situations to prevent something like this from happening again. If you like this video, be sure to check out the full story of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961. Click now to learn the whole hijacking tale. Thanks.